Welcome everybody to another edition of Pandemic Punditry's Putting the Planet on a Pandemic Diet. We are thrilled, honored to have Christoph Langwallner. He is the CEO, founder of WhatIF, and also runs a nonprofit called the Nutritional Paradox, and he will talk to us a little bit about both those endeavors. He's got a great sort of background, and we'll discover that as we go through. But this is going to be, I know, a very fascinating discussion, timely discussion. And so welcome to Pandemic Punditry, Christoph.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, so are we. So if you could give us a little bit of a background. I know you have a food tech background and you were born in Austria. What was your sort of road or career path like? I mean, from where you were in the sciences, and I'm assuming you're still there. How did that sort of evolve to this current role that you have?
Well, I grew up in Austria in a family business surrounded with cows producing milk for our local dairy. My grandfather, my father, my uncle, they were butchers making sausages for the village and for the community. And my grandmother, my aunt, and probably a few others were actually then cooking up food in our restaurant, serving it to people that attended a wedding or a party or what have you, or just a day-to-day meal coming in. So that was a perfect supply chain, because literally you knew literally each and every single animal that went onto your plate of your customer. So that was great experience and a great journey to grow up like that, to be honest. I've always had some sort of a look at agriculture. Obviously, growing up, my mom encouraged me a lot to actually study and to do a degree, a diploma degree in agriculture. And later on, I decided, because I really felt in love with learning, I said, okay, let me see what else is out there. And I picked up food science and technology with a huge focus on meat processing on the way. So that kept me then going. That set me up for taking up quality control roles in companies, as well as R&D roles in companies. And about 20 over years, my wife and I decided to leave Austria behind. And we said initially, after 2 years, we are back. I guess that didn't happen because we then moved to the UK. I worked for a multinational for several years. It was a fantastic exposure, super experience. 2001, September 11th, 2001, changed a little bit all of our plans, I guess. And so it did for us. And we moved on. I moved on to help an Austrian entrepreneur in Russia, gain that sort of experience. And then in 2005, I started a company that is today known as Sumiga, which is a company producing seasonings in Kerala in India. So relocated my entire family to Kerala and had a fantastic time. Super community, best friends still out there. I hope a few of them listening and tuning in. That would be fantastic. And then after building this and taking the company through the financial crisis 2008, 2009, which was a very, very difficult journey, of course. I then started it in China, exited from it because of motivations. Probably we can talk about it a little bit later on. But then about 5 years ago, I started to build a company that is today known as WhatIF Foods.
And so let's step back a second. I'm sure Katika has got another question as well. So I think our audience is sort of curious to find out what exactly do you mean by a nutrition paradox? And I think let's set the stage a little bit before we get into what ifs. To understand sort of the motivation behind it and the reason that you actually started WhatIF Foods. So what is this nutrition paradox, and why is it a paradox?
So over the decades, obviously somebody like me with some sort of exposure on a global basis has the opportunity to see a fair bit. And what became apparent to me over the last 5 years, early on, creating a new journey, a new corporate entity, was that at times I had to explain really what's going on in food and agriculture and what the system is all about and what's broken. And it was quite of eye-opening experience for me that so many people, even within the industry, have very little comprehensive view on the system per se. So we started the journey. It was a couple of colleagues and I. We basically sat down on a weekend and we said, so let us just write down what we know, have a backbone of a document, and then try to do research and see whether or not we can beef this all up with evidence. And so we did. And I guess a few months later, we developed a white paper that then brought things together and say, you know, from the notion that you are what you eat, from that notion we started, but in today's day and age, that is not true anymore, because we and our planet, we are what we eat. So the notion of a one-on-one relationship with our food is not true anymore, because our action on a day-to-day basis determines in which environment we are living in. Climate change and all of these buzzwords are out there. So that motivated us to basically say, hey, we need to bring this word out a little bit more, make sure that people understand and learn with us as to what the problems are. And we started to call it the nutritional paradox, driven by so many paradoxical situations in that system. I give you a few of those if you wish. For example, in today's day and age, hypothetically, if you count all the calories together that we produce on farms, we produce enough calories for 10 billion people already. But
and that's significant. And that's significant because we have 8 billion people already on the planet, right?
Today
so we have
about
2 billion.
7,
yeah.
We have about 7.8 billion people on the planet right now. And there's this big concern about food security, that by 2050, to feed 10 billion people, we have a problem with the food supply. But as a matter of fact, this is not our own planet's production capacity issue. It is a human distribution issue, both in terms of supply chains, because in developing countries, a lot of food, up to 40% at times, gets lost between the farm to the primary processor. And in developed countries where these sort of supply chains are streamlined, in developed countries, such as the United States, Europe, and so on and so forth, the consumers and consumers, retailers, so I say in the fridges, we are losing 30–40%. So we're losing a lot of food waste on the way as to how we treat it. Then there is another part of people, about 2.3 billion people today are overweight and obese. So there's an overconsumption of calories, where at the same time, we have about 800 million people undernourished, not enough food, right? So there's this dilemma in here that we are overeating while we have still hunger on the planet. And last but not least, the calories that we consume in terms of biofuels are not used in the food supply chain anymore. So this conversion of food into fuel is another challenge that takes actually calories away from our supplies into food. So the main point I'm trying to make is that despite our population growth up to 10 billion people, we do not have a production capacity issue in terms of the planet's production capacity, because we already produce enough calories for a hypothetical 10 billion people. Notion, this is a hypothetical figure. I'm painting here a scenario, right? So what we have set out with the nutrition paradox is to dig deeper into it and say, what is going on here? Why is it the way it is? Why, for example, are we producing 1/3 of all greenhouse gases? You know, the agriculture, the agro-food industry admits more greenhouse gases than all transportation together. That is land, sea, and water. Isn't that crazy? You don't think about it if you eat, but that is reality. So the greenhouse gas emissions are huge. 77% of our arable land is basically for livestock. Just pause here for a second and think. 77% of arable land that we use is to feed livestock, for 17% of calories that we consume. How inefficient is that system? 70% of water, of freshwater reserves that are being used, are used by the agricultural industry. And on top of this, you know, on top of this resource dilemma, we then have an issue whereby we have diversified away biodiversity, agrobiodiversity. What I really refer to is 60% of today's 60% of today's calories originate in 3 crops. And despite us knowing perfectly well that we can consume 300 over 1,000 species fit for human consumption. right? So there's a mismatch as to what we need in terms of our human bodies, our digestive systems, and what we actually produce. And therefore, 7 people out of 10 are actually sick and suffer from what we do, because of 2.6 billion people are overweight and obese, and 2.3 billion people are what we call nutritionally challenged. I know I'm bombarding you with a lot of data points.
No, these are fascinating facts. I want to revisit a couple of them. So 60% of of the calories that we produce come from 3 crops. I assume that's corn, wheat, and rice, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So and you said, was it 300 or 300,000 other food source out there?
So 300,000 or 3 lakhs.
300,000. Okay.
300,000, 3 lakhs of species are known for human consumption. No, species includes crops, plants, and insects, and our ancestors would have picked up, on the way.
Right.
But in the more modern day and age, about 30,000 plants are known for human consumption. So 30,000, yet we have 30,000 plants, yet we have streamlined down to 3 crops, making 60% of our consumed calories. Another data point there, if you're interested, is 12 crops and 5 animals today supply 75% of all food that we consume. It's just
12 crops and 5 animals.
Yeah, 12 crops and 5 animals equals to 75% of all food that we consume. Okay, so that is an equation that is very unhealthy for both the consumers and the people out there, because they don't get the diversity into their diets that they need in order to be nourished, well nourished, and therefore have a decent life and well-being. And on the other extreme end is our planet, because we have taken away the agrobiodiversity so that our farming communities would have the ability to actually do crop rotations and have a vibrant farm with a lot of different producers. We took this all away. So it's all about monocultures today, it's all about crop protections and so on and so forth. So not only is the planet suffering, not only are the consumers suffering, but also the community, the farming community per se, is suffering. And I don't have to tell you, just open the newspaper every day in the morning and you can find that there's another farmer who has committed suicide, whether be it in Australia, be it in the UK, or be it in India. Farmers are committing suicide all over the place.
And how, of the world's population of 7.8 billion, as you said, what percentage of that, or what number of that are farmers or people who produce food?
So the stats that I have on top of my mind is that there are about 2.6 billion people directly connected to the agricultural industry. 2.6 billion people. If I expand a little bit on that, then I can share with you that 2.6 billion people directly connected to the farming industry today are challenged because 52% of arable land is severely degraded already, or is degrading in a rapid speed. We are seeing today a 35 times faster degradation of arable land than ever seen in history. This is 23 soccer fields per minute of land that we're losing because it is just not productive anymore, because the soils are becoming so poor because of improper practices. And I don't have to tell you, if 2.6 billion people are connected directly to agriculture, that most of them, 74%, are the poorest of the poor. They suffer the most. So the OECD came out very recently to basically warn everybody to say, if we do not come up with a more vibrant and resilient farming community, we are going to set them in motion because they become climate change refugees. We are bringing them into a stream of migration that otherwise would not be there, because they don't have a meaningful livelihood anymore, right? They're not making enough for a proper living. So that is, all of this is the nutritional paradox. There are so many paradoxical situations in it. You can pick and choose, and I can bounce figures off to you. And that's what we call the nutritional paradox. All of that combined. I'm quite happy to share with your audience and with yourself the resources. This is our open platform. It's there for everybody to understand and learn and participate and share and voice out opinions. It's our non-for-profit, as you have said. It is our open source platform for everybody to join in.
And Christoph,
sorry, we've just got live questions coming in, Lavi, which is relevant to what Christoph is discussing right now. And the question is there a role for technology-driven quality assessment to help this particular situation?
It's a fascinating question. The reason is because there's actually a lot of VC money and otherwise investor money in the technology aspect of agriculture. My answer is this. If we bring in technology to bring in more efficiencies, yet still do the wrong thing, we are just digging a deeper hole. In other words, we have to actually tackle the foundational challenges, and then technology can help us. You know, technology can always help us. But the reality of the fact is, look, we have been working in Indonesia a number of years ago, and an average farmer there has probably 25 coconut trees. I don't have to give him technology to understand how the coconut tree looks like. The farmer knows his coconut trees better than probably he knows his house, you know, the plates in his house, for sure. So therefore, technology has to, for me, technology has to have means in order to rectify a broken system and in order to make it easier to help these farming communities, rather than just trying to bring technology for the sake of technology into the system that won't really help us getting out of this situation we are in.
So what role does future fit crops, as you call them in your website, what role does that play in ensuring that we're helping the farming community as well as solving this nutritional paradox?
So the motivation behind the future fit crops is exactly what I've referred to before, and that is that about 52% of arable land is severely degraded or is degrading. And if we want to bring meaningful livelihoods to these farming communities, we need to find crops that are climate change resilient and grow on this degraded arable land with meaningful yields. Now, what we do in my company is we don't stop there, because here it is just one dimension that you resolve, two dimensions that you resolve. One is the degraded arable land you're going to make use for, so you rejuvenate that, and you probably have an impact on the farming community. But for us, future fit crops are also such crops that are beneficial for human health. So we wouldn't just grow or ask farming communities to grow future fit crops for the sake of the former if we do not see a benefit for our human diets. And especially we are driven by diversifying our diets, by really taking a stand and say, if we eat today, let's eat at least 5, 6, 7 different products, so that we help not only our bodies and our digestive system, but also the degraded arable land. We rejuvenate that if we do it smartly, as well as the farming communities. So we have a checklist, and if a forgotten crop or an orphan crop meets this criteria, then we call it a future fit crop. It's a term that we have coined that indicates that we think about these 3 things: degraded arable land, farming community resilience, as well as the well-being and the proper nutrition for us as humans who consume our foods.
Christoph, if people know these facts and information about the nutritional paradox, that's available on a website for your nonprofit. If you share that?
It's nutritionalparadox.com. Quite easy to find, and probably can, if you want, just come and visit my LinkedIn profile. You will find all the resources and referenced at LinkedIn.
I wanted to get the plug in, but because I'm sure people are going to ask that question eventually.
Sure.
So I know your website is very, very useful.
So we talked about obesity on one hand, Christoph, and then you spoke about malnutrition. But I remember you also talking about this concept of hidden hunger.
Yes.
Can you explain to the audience what that means and how you're hoping to solve that with the work that you do?
Yeah, with pleasure. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail there. In the earlier stage of our discussion here, I mentioned that there are about 2 billion people being nutritionally challenged, as we call them. Within that bucket of 2 billion people, there's an increasing, growing trend of hidden hunger. Now, what is hidden hunger? Hidden hunger refers to an undersupply of micronutrients in our foods. So the way to think about this is, if you think about people that are undernourished, and particularly children that suffer from stunting or wasting, you see it immediately. They're just, you have the images in mind. I don't have to remind you how the kids look like. At the same token, at the same time, if I talk to you about obesity and overweight, we know how they look like. because they have their bellies. Now, hidden hunger is much more difficult to diagnose because you just don't see it. Okay, the hidden hunger is in a population whereby one person has a perfectly well balanced body mass index, no problem at all to the outside world, but there is not enough micronutrient supply or one-sided micronutrient supply, and then they have challenges with their systems, with all sorts of things are coming through. Very difficult to diagnose, but very easy to tackle. Diversified diet, bring micronutrients back into the system. Yeah. Just as another notion to the food system and what we are eating, right? Most of our ingredients that we use are refined in nature. So what does it mean? It means we're taking fibers out of our diet, and by refining, we also take the micronutrients away from the diet. So those are typical two sources of that problem, the hidden hunger issue. We call it nutritionally challenged because even, and if I may just elaborate a little bit more on the nutritionally challenged sort of category, we basically say, even if today you know that you are suffering from a not well-balanced diet, even if you know, healthy eating is rather expensive. And that's actually, if you think about junk food in today's day and age, is cheaper than your 5 portions of fruit and vegetables. There are parts in the world where water is more expensive than beer. And one has to ask the question, is that the right trend? Do we really want to, do we want to see that? Your five portions of fruit and vegetables should be cheap because they are nourishing us. But unfortunately, it is not the case. So we refer to the nutritionally challenged category, not only to hidden hunger, but we also include people that actually don't have the means, the income, the dollars available for them to actually buy themselves a healthy, diversified diet because it is expensive. To eat well is expensive.
So there were 5 common sort of micronutrient deficiencies that doctors sort of cite, right? Which is vitamin A, iodine, iron, zinc, and folate. Are those the sort of things that you're addressing as well, or is it a wider range of micronutrient deficiencies?
So I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified to give you the sort of answers there. But the stand that I'm taking is the following. There are certain populations, because where they're located at, and because of, for example, the water that they have or the soil that they're growing the major foods on, those sort of populations need an intervention. Because if they have, for example, an iron deficiency, then you need to have an intervention program here. Now, there are specialized NGOs, there are specialized people who help governments, and those sort of interventions must take place. Here, if there is political goodwill, it will happen. If there is political ill will, it will not happen, okay? That is not part of the nutritional paradox. Intervention is not really part of the nutritional paradox. What is part of the nutritional paradox is to diversify our crop portfolio and the plants that we consume in order to overcome micronutrient deficiency in a broader context. The reason is this. We have done a mathematical model. Frankly, our computers in our office couldn't actually do it anymore. We had to go to the university and switch on a big computer in order to compute that. What we have done is we have compared and contrasted our ancestors' diet, hunters and gatherers. They were basically picking about 300 different plants, insects, and so on and so forth. Every now and then a rabbit, and probably once in a blue moon a deer if they were lucky. Those sort of diets, compare and contrast with our modern diet. And you see that there is a 7 Google difference in terms of potential first and primary metabolites that our bodies are being hit with. 7 Googles is 10 to the power of 700. That's the difference. Now, science, to be honest, is at the beginning of understanding the complexity, right? We know of, for example, scurvy and vitamin C. We know because our sailors have suffered in the early days, right? We know all of that, but there are so many layers that are there to be explored. So therefore, to combat that, diversify your diet. Have your fibers in it. Have your micronutrients coming from a richness of a diversified diet.
Just individually speaking, I mean, so if you're listening, if our audience is listening, they're absorbing the message that you are giving. Should we sort of do an assessment individually, say, hey, how much diversity do we have in our particular diet? So for 1 week, sort of, use a food diary and say, I ate 8 or 9 or 10 or only 3 or 2 types of vegetables and this much of grains and this much of meat or whatever. I mean, is that a useful exercise for somebody to do to understand how, where they fit in this sort of continuum of diversity of the food you eat? I think, would that be a helpful exercise for people to understand and do? I mean, maybe, average that out. I think, many will fall under, I guess, under 10 or 15, maybe in some cases, especially if you're living in the developed world. But I think in parts of Asia, it's maybe a little less. I don't know, I'm making an assumption there, but would that be a useful exercise?
Any conscious effort that helps us to break bad habits is welcome. If it means that you count how many different species and plants and so on and so forth you have eaten a day or a week, and you get the consciousness going and your brain and yourself and your family starts playing with what food really means for us. Is food just a source of energy, or is food an event where we sit together and have fun, have entertainment, is colorful, is vibrant, it has the zest, it is hot, it is community, it is well-being, it is belonging, it is richness. All of that is what food is to me and to us in our company. And that's what we actually celebrate. But food should not be forgotten just to be energy and to be just, it's not that. So everything that consciously helps us to understand what we actually eat and makes us play with it so that we become aware of what we eat is more than welcome. That brings me to the point that if you would actually start counting your different dishes that you eat and the ingredients used in there, you start breaking habits. You probably start adopting different habits. There are other techniques out there. Go and do a fasting program, for example. I'm speaking a lot about hidden hunger, and I speak a lot about hungry people. But I wanted to explore for myself, what does it actually mean to be hungry? And I went on a water fast for 10 days. And it was an eye-opening journey for me. I'm not recommending it. Please consult your doctor if you want to do it. But I'm just saying, play around with it and explore what it actually means to do such things, and to explore a different avenue. In that context, if it's okay, I just give you probably a little bit of another layer of what is possible for us individually in order to bring change about. So I'm a very typical continental Europe guy. I'm 183 centimeters tall, and at one point in time had too many kilos on my bone. I still have too many kilos on my bone, but I had about 125, 130 kilos. I wanted to change my lifestyle, and I started to become a flexitarian. And so flexitarian, I said, from Monday to Friday, I'm not eating meat anymore, no meat anymore. And on Saturday, Sunday, I enjoy that with my family. If I don't, we eat. From there, I became a vegetarian. I don't touch meat anymore and hardly drink milk. Every now and then, I just can't say no to cheese. But what does that mean? It means that every year, I am saving the planet from about 1,500 liters of petrol and its carbon footprint, because that is how much less of carbon footprint I actually consume for myself. And about 1 million liters worth of water I'm saving. Therefore, enough for 2 or 3 or even 4 additional people on a day-to-day basis for their fruits and vegetables. So the individual choices that we make have huge levers that we can unleash. Unfortunately, we don't think like that. It's like a little bit like voting, right? Your individual vote, what does it mean? Why should I go and vote? But in a community, it matters. And for us in our diet as well. Individual choices do make a big difference if a community joins together and steps up. And even to the extent that a carbon footprint of just eating meat is about 1,500 liters of petrol for an average European. It's mind-boggling to me. Thank you.
So just segue for a moment there, Christoph. We have a question coming in live from the audience. Is cinnamon a future fit crop? Sri Lanka is the largest cinnamon exporter, and how can we do better?
Well, Ceylon, cinnamon, and so on and so forth is definitely, even if you look at our portfolio, we have an apple cinnamon shake. And it's a lovely ingredient. I think most Europeans are fondly remembered on Christmas if we smell cinnamon. Do I really call it? Would I call it a future fit crop? I certainly would not. It's a spice. It flavors up our dishes. And what we actually do, and that's hardcore because the apple cinnamon shake in our portfolio, we use cinnamon in order to make future fit crops taste nice and taste different and so on. So it's all about that exploring different flavors with it and so on and so forth. So per se, the crop itself, I would not classify and qualify as a future fit crop, but we need it desperately for flavors and for the enjoyment and the excitement in our foods.
So if cinnamon was a flavoring ingredient, or as was cardamom or maybe any other spices, so spices wouldn't fall into this category, but would something like millets, moringa, for example, would that be a future fit crop? And why? I mean, just so that people are clear.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to clarify this. Yeah, so for us, what's important is that these crops grow on degraded arable land, meaning that land that is otherwise not productive anymore and doesn't produce income for farming communities. So setting this in motion, the thought process is that crops, therefore, that we consider future fit crops ought to be staple foods, staple crops. Things like, for example, the papara groundnut, your legumes, or you mentioned millets. There is fonio out of West Africa that is growing on very, very poor soil. So those are crops that we would love to investigate. Or out of Europe, there's a crop called the lupines. It grows wherever soy doesn't grow anymore, and these are vast areas of land. And it has a decent yield and is rich in plant protein, and therefore we investigate there a lot. And then there are a number of more. Moringa certainly is also one. Moringa is a staple food in the Indian cuisine because of the drumsticks. But we use the leaves, and our philosophy here is if you have moringa trees in between of arable land, you break the wind and hence stop the soil erosion the moment you have that. So yeah, and it is a wonderful source of vital micronutrients and a very interesting amino acid profile in terms of the protein that is in the leaves. So yeah, those sort of ideas.
So Christoph, just a little segue to so we've, I think, exhaustively and in an incredibly insightful and detailed manner outline what are the constituent parts of the nutritional paradox. And I'm sure, I mean, certainly for me, it's been sort of a aha moment, or several of them, in terms of the numbers and the data that you provided. So one way that you suggested, and very, very well put, of the individual impact one can have on this situation by adopting, like you did, mostly, vegetarian and even almost vegan diet as your individual contribution as a human on the planet. But I know that you've started a company called WhatIF Foods. I see the packaging in the back of you. So you can tell us maybe a little bit about, so you've outlined the paradox, you've created an organization, you've open sourced all the data that you've collected over many years. What is WhatIF Foods then? Is that a way to resolve the nutrition paradox? And how have you gone about doing that? And what are you doing there? And that should be part of an interesting conversation all its own.
Lavi, you're spot on. Thank you very much. It is our answer to the nutrition paradox. How we have gone about it is to basically start walking the talk by saying, let's identify a number of future fit crops. We don't believe we have the golden bullet, okay? We don't have the golden bullet, but we have certainly a number of answers to questions that bother not only us as consumers, but also the farming communities. So what we have done is basically we said, as an organization, we have to be sustainable. And what it means is we have to generate healthy profits in order to pay for the capital that is employed in the organization. So how can we look at future fit crops in a day and age where your mainstream crops are so cheap that a future fit crop would be on the first surface of it, not be competitive? How do we go about it? So what we did is we looked into things where we think, first of all, we produce rubbish food, and can we actually, by redesigning the food, bring in here opportunities where we take cost out and take this costs, the saving that we have generated, to actually then engage with farming communities to grow these future fit crops that we then process and put into our products. Now, one example is the Bambara groundnut and instant noodles. Now, instant noodles is a fascinating industry altogether. It is 105 billion portions on an annual basis in size, about $35 billion worth of a market, largely consumed in Asia, in this part of the world. And interestingly, the large majority of these instant noodles are deep fried because it's a very efficient way to dehydrate the instant noodle in order for it to be shelf stable and have a decent shelf life. So deep frying process takes about 3.5 minutes. Now, if you would establish a very similar product that doesn't taste as nice because we don't deep fry, using air drying technology, you need about 35 minutes, so 10 times the time. So that would translate into huge CapEx programs, huge factories, or small output for an existing manufacturer. Therefore, the industry has always gone about let's do deep frying. The problem with deep frying is that predominantly we use palm oil in the process. And because of deep frying, you take water out and the oil gets into the noodle strand. So you have up to 20% of vegetable oil in your dehydrated instant noodles. So you have refined carbohydrates and refined oil in a combination that then fills up somebody's stomach. So there are no nutrients in it. There's hardly any benefit to a farming community and and what have you. So we actually stepped back from this opportunity and we said, so what if we would to be able to take commercially viable the deep fryer out of an instant noodle line? What's the new horizon that we can build? Is there a new opportunity? Is there a new landscape that we actually can develop? And that got us going. And today we have succeeded on a commercial scale to take the deep fryer out. Our technology uses air as well, but we establish it in 3.5 minutes. So therefore, our technology doesn't suffer any capacity. Hence, there is a huge opportunity in terms of cost of production. And then we take the oil that we not use in the process, we take the cost, we take the money that we otherwise would need in order to buy that oil, we take that to engage with farming communities to grow the Bambara groundnut or the supplies of moringa and other ingredients in order to make them a nutritious, nutrient-dense product that is as easy to consume for the consumer, but nutrient-dense rather than calorie-dense. In other words, our instant noodles, they don't look different. They look different because they have all sorts of colors in the meantime. We throw moringa in order to make it green and look different. So they look different, but in terms of its preparation, there's no change. There's no need to change habits on a consumer level. And that's what we have gone about it, and that's what we're doing with our products at WhatIF.
So wow. Interesting name, Christoph, WhatIF. So what was your inspiration behind calling it WhatIF?
It was a tough journey to get to WhatIF. I can tell you we had countless conversations internally. We certainly didn't want to call it Christoph Foods. That is something that has never been on the plate. But WhatIF has been essentially what we run. So we had a list of 80 potential names for our brand. And at one point in time, you have to make a call. And we stepped back from all sorts of names, and we basically asked ourselves the question, what is it that we do as an organization on a day-to-day basis? And on a day-to-day basis, we are asking ourselves these what-if questions. What if we can take out the deep fryer of an instant noodle line? What if we can actually grow the Bambara groundnut with farming communities? And how does a new world look like? So WhatIF became is very close to us. It's in our DNA. And then if you have WhatIF on a package, we basically invite the consumers to think along with us and enter into a conversation. I think today, in today's day and age with social media, you have the opportunity to speak with people rather than at them through advertisements and what have you. So WhatIF is also designed for that aspect of entering into conversation with consumers. And if you look at the logo that we have produced, it's a bit of a quirky, funny sort of a take on a question mark that one can interpret in all sorts of different means. Is half a heart, is a question mark, is steam coming out of a kettle, could be a mohawk as well. So what we're trying to do here is that we are giving a very playful approach to a serious problem, which is nutrition, farming communities, degraded arable land. It's a serious problem. But the engagement with our product should be fun, should be playful, should be exciting, should actually remind us to what food is all about, rather than just empty calories in a particular supply chain driven by key performance indicators that there's no key performance indicator out there that takes actually into consideration human well-being. We do. So that is essentially.
So I know that you launched. So I know you launched in the middle of this pandemic, right? So this is the company's 5 years. You launched 8 weeks ago with this line, and I would like you to sort of expand on what is it that what are the products currently, and what's the future roadmap look like. But I wanted to sort of, before you do that, to just make a point. I think this whole technology that you put in place to sort of replace the deep fryer, reduce the time. I assume that's the technology that you brought to bear in terms of patented processes. And I know that you've also built your own factories to do this. It's not because there's no existing sort of co-packer line you could take advantage of, because at the end of that co-packer line is a deep fryer, right? So you obviously had to sort of build this technology yourself, which is an amazing story. And I think also answers a previous question one of our audience has is, what is the role of technology? So the role of technology is very clearly amplified by what you've done, which is essentially, how do you take something that's really bad for you out of a production process and replace it with a high technology thing that you've developed? And that, I assume, is what you would say was a good use of or application of technology into our food system, correct?
Absolutely. You're spot on that. Yes. Yeah.
And in terms of the line, what have you launched right now? I know that you have a shake. I saw you drink one the other day.
A couple of shakes, I guess, and some soups and noodles. Is that correct, Christoph?
Yeah, it's correct. So basically, how we go about building. So WhatIF Foods is essentially an umbrella brand, and we have done a few categories. We started off with 3. So the soup, shake, as well as our instant noodles, or our noodles. We call it the quick noodles, or whatever you want to call it. And the idea behind it is the following. If you have certain time available at an occasion, the occasion could be breakfast, a snack in the morning, lunch, snack afternoon, dinner in the evening, late night snack. And if you have 5-10 minutes time, how can we supply a nutritious product for that particular occasion to you, so that you have a healthy start in your day, or you're closing your day with something that nourishes you throughout the night? So that is the idea behind it. Now, quite frankly, the soups and the shakes, they were born out of basically saying that, okay, look at the fridge. How many fruits and vegetables are in there, and do we have fruits? So my day starts off by basically saying, I take the old bananas and the apples, I put it in the blender, I add 3 scoops of our either apple cinnamon shake or our ube shake, or even do a mix, because I love the mix of the both, and top it up with coconut water, or with probably a soy milk oil or something like that, soy milk. And I give it a good steer, and I'm done for a day. I have a good start. I have nutrients fueled in my body, and they're rushing through my veins, so to speak. So that's how I start. And then in lunch, if I don't have really time to order food or stuff like that, it takes me 10 minutes to make, cut some vegetables, put it in a bowl, cook the noodles with it, add the seasonings, and off I go. I am done. And the same concept in the evening, for example, if I come back home after playing a round of tennis and I'm exhausted, why not have a hot soup that actually fuels your batteries back up? That is the sort of idea and philosophy behind the portfolio. you have reminded me that we have actually launched during the pandemic in the lockdown period in Singapore. We called it a circuit breaker. And what we have done in addition to it, we actually have made sure that we have all the nutrients in our products that we currently need in order to take care of our immune system. So there are immune boosting aspects to it as well. But we are all about the diversified diet and basically bring that back in. So therefore, our current portfolio may intercept with people naturally because they consume soups and shakes or do it at home. Others say, no, it's not my piece of cake. Then it's also fine. Have an instant noodle if you want, have one of our noodles. At the end of the day, the pipeline is rich. Not only will we horizontally diversify into more of those sort of applications, but also vertically. There is a number of new colors that we're working on the noodles. They will come in all sorts of yellow, orange, red, and probably even black and brown. There are ideas that we're floating around. They are very, very exciting, super cool to look at. To be frankly, it's a joyful experience for your eyes if you look at these colorful aspects of things. And then there's a number of soups that we can play around with, a number of different flavors, and then we can also tailor them, of course, for different regions. Because what's spicy for a European is not even a starting point for an Indian, quite frankly, as we know. Right?
It's so true.
so therefore, there will be.
So we have a couple of questions. I think one was somebody had asked how big the plant-based market in India is at the category, but I think Christoph is probably not qualified. And how does that compare with Singapore? I mean, obviously, I think Singaporeans generally eat a lot more meat than Indians do on average in terms of a kilogram. It doesn't mean that they have more meat eaters than vegetarians, but so I think the quantum, from my understanding, is quite high in Singapore, and a majority of the meat consumed there is pork and chicken. So I think there are some difference. So the alternative protein market, I think, in India is growing. Yeah. There was also one more. The question is, if a startup wanted to work with you, how would they go about doing that? They would just contact you via LinkedIn, or who's maybe aligned with your same mission.
That's the easiest way. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm really active on LinkedIn. We do share quite a fair amount of thoughts on a weekly basis. And is anybody out there who wants to come and speak to us, reach out to us. It's basically then an arrangement of a call away. Today's Zoom gives you the opportunity to speak frequently on a day-to-day basis to many people. So quite happy to engage.
Yeah, I've had a couple of questions come through on my WhatsApp directly as well. One is, I don't know whether you're the best person to ask this, Christoph, but I'll ask it anyway, is with this whole nutrient-rich diet that you're speaking of, what role does intermittent fasting, etc., play in getting a balanced sort of a diet?
Probably that question brings me back to what I've said before. To me personally, any playful attempt to experiment and explore food is a welcome attempt for you, for your family, for an entire community. Because if you go on an intermittent fasting program, or you go on a water fasting program, or the only thing I don't recommend is don't go on these nonsense diets. The yo-yo effect is a well-proven. That's probably the only science-proven effect that you get from it. So that doesn't work. But exploring the possibilities with food rather than just by prescription cooking is, I think, what is really the fun element of it. And if I can have a wish, then I would say bring your kids in the kitchen and let them chop the tomatoes, let them cook the rice, let them cook and let them peel the bananas. Because too many kids in today's day and age don't know anymore where stuff comes from. They think that the cows behind the packaged milk are happy because they see a smiley cow face on the package, and this is far from the truth.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Any more questions?
Yeah, one more question actually. I think, Christoph, you've already answered it in a roundabout way, but I'll ask it again. Now, obviously, there's a huge revolution for plant-based, alternative protein, etc. With your nutrient-rich program that you're talking about with WhatIF Foods, would you at any juncture envision a powder or a meal that, for example, Beyond can put into their burger and make that nutrient dense?
Oh, we would love to. We would love to start a program around this, because everything that gets us into a diversified agro system as well as in a diversified diet is beneficial for all of us. We are building WhatIF Foods and the Nutritional Paradox because we want to generate the necessary impact for future generations. If we happen to be commercially successful, then that's a welcome side benefit, but that's not our motivation. Our motivation is to impact on these three layers that I keep on referring to. It's the farming community, it's the degraded arable land, and it's the well-being of our consumers out there. So yeah, that's essentially where the motivation lies, and where our head and our heart is at the same time.
So I think that does bring up a interesting sort of, and it's a great question, Karthika. I think we've featured on Pandemic Punditry's Putting the Planet on Pandemic Diet a number of smart protein companies, and we continue to do that. And I think I found Christoph, and we found Christoph sort of an interesting sort of a segue, or maybe a different perspective, shall we say? So yes, I think a lot of those smart protein companies are doing a very essential thing of taking the animal out, which is, you've clearly shown with your numbers, has a significant impact on the degradable arable land that we have, simply because, resources are going to feed an animal and then we're eating the animal or taking its milk or its eggs. And I think that argument's clearly made. I think, though, there's a subtlety here that I think maybe we should sort of make sure we do say, which is that, yes, let's say that happens. The next sort of thing that's coming is that even if we do go plant-based, like many of us, at least the three of us here have done, the carrot that you ate or are eating today is significantly different from a nutrient perspective, isn't it, Christoph, than the one that you ate 25 or 50 years ago? And that was the point that you were making with the supercomputers you used to actually look at the micronutrients there. Am I right? Is that the point, that the next thing is that even though we would eat plants, because of the Green Revolution and all the stuff that we've done to our planet, essentially that carrot even is no longer as nutritious as something that was 50 years ago, correct?
That's perfectly right. There's increasing research out there. Super cool universities have done it, and that shows that under climate change, with more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, the current crops actually embed less of micronutrients because they are not needed anymore. They embed less micronutrients into their produce. So therefore, not only do we refine and strip off the micronutrients because we are processing them too much, or process everything out for simplicity's sake, but also if you keep on relying on these current crops, they will actually have less micronutrients to start with. And that comes after selective breeding of, for example, the grains have been selected bred for thousands of years. So the richness in terms of their pool is not as great anymore as it used to be. So while there are approaches to fix that problem on, for example, wheat, and put a lot of research money behind that, our approach is, Mother Nature has thousands of plants out there that grow very well on degraded arable land, and we need to make sure that we are making use of that because of its ill side effects if we don't. Because if we don't, we will not stop deforestation. If we don't stop deforestation, then 2.5 times the size of India of primary forests will have to give way in order to feed 10 billion people by 2050. That is not a desirable future. We need to make sure we are growing stuff on this land that is basically left behind by the intensive agricultural system. But also as a note, I'm not advocating here tree hugging approaches, because at the end of the day, we are billions of people on that planet, and we need to make sure that the food that we produce is affordable and adequate for a large size of the population. Else we become elitist again. And then we have, again, superfoods around the place. I don't believe in it. Frankly, superfoods, I don't believe. There's no such thing as a superfood. There's a super diet, diversify. And I don't want to contribute to superfood notions. I want to contribute to something that is affordable for all on a fair and just basis.
So common question from our audience is, where can they get WhatIF Foods, the noodles, the shakes, the soups?
So as of now, 8 weeks in the making, we are available online in Singapore. Right now, it is basically the mainstream channel to distribute to people anyways because of the circuit break and lockdown. And folks out there who wish to actually buy, and if you are in India, let me know, reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'll make sure we ship to you.
Okay, fantastic.
And Christoph, where is your manufacturing located, and you know, are you impacted by the disruption in global supply chains at all?
Yeah, our headquarters are in Singapore. Our research, science, and support functions are all in Singapore. We have our factory that produces WhatIF Foods in Malaysia. It's actually just across the border from Singapore into Malaysia. But as you can imagine, for the last, I think, 4 months now, I have not been there because the borders are not open. And we do have disruptions with regards to that sort of supply chain, intercompany aspects, but there's also raw materials. We are challenged there as everybody else is challenged. Yeah, and then we have one more project in Australia, in northern parts of Queensland that we run as well. But that is in its making and probably ready to talk about in 2021, 2022.
And so you have plans to, to sort of get your goods in Asia first, or I mean, Singapore, Malaysia, what other markets? You said you'll ship to India, but you know, from a retail perspective, what is your initial footprint, and what's your sort of future footprint?
I'm feeling extremely blessed right now because since we are in Singapore on the market with WhatIF Foods, we have been approached by at least 3-4 people from different geographies who basically said, hey, we want to distribute this product. We want to help you get into the market or even to join ventures for particular markets. India is on that list. So we have a project that looks actually at the production site in India. It's very, very early days. I can't promise anything at this point in time, of course, but it would be a fantastic sort of a 360 loop closed for me to go back to do a project again in India. And other parts of the world. We are thinking of doing Europe and so on and so forth. But let's step by step. We need to make sure that we're doing this in the right sequence, in the right order. Yeah.
Sorry, we have one final question coming in from the audience from Kavita. Thanks for joining us today, Kavita. So she's going back to the original discussion about Singaporeans eating a lot of meat, but they throw in many greens to give it like a healthy twist. But the point she's trying to make is that vegetable supplements, protein shakes, there's an overconsumption of it, and what your thoughts are with regards to that.
So where's overconsumption?
Protein shakes and vegetable-based supplements.
I'm not sure whether or not vitamins, supplements.
Yeah, supplements and protein shakes and things like that.
So supplements, again, at times there might be a need for an interception. If you are deficient in a certain nutrient because of whatever disease or whatever challenge that you have had, or whatever it might be, then be good advised to take the supplements that you need, right? So my auntie, for example, came out of a horrendous cancer operation and she suffered potassium shortage, and that being supplemented was a basic need. That is where it should be. I'm not sure whether or not I see the same side of the market here, that there's too much protein shakes in Singapore on the market. I honestly don't see it. It might be in the gyms where my son used to go. They do consume the protein, but then they are working out and burning probably 3,500 to 4,000 calories in a day, and probably they need it. Otherwise, they wouldn't look that lean as they do. My take on supplements is, as I've said before, there are certain aspects in life where you need it. You intervene. You know, if there is a cold coming and you fetch it, do top up your vitamin C, for example. But I am not a doctor. I'm not qualified to give recommendations on that. So I strongly recommend to seek professional advice before you do anything of that sort.
So I think we're sort of at the hour mark, which is where where this sort of nicely dovetails into. I think to a point. I think various people are making what you're saying is eat the real food where as opposed to a shake. If you need an intervention because of a certain condition, whether it's illness or athletics, then take it. But if you use a nutrient dense product like what you're producing, you're more likely to get real food in there as opposed to sort of some blended stuff in there, right? So I guess that's the net of what you're saying.
The essence of it is, if you have a soup and a shake, if you have noodles, and if you can celebrate over it without the guilt being attached, because you know it has the nutrients in it and it comes from a diversified diet, and then it does good for communities and arable land, and it helps therefore bring a better future for the next generation, our grandchildren's generation about, then I think it is a brilliant cause. So therefore, I invite everybody to take part of it.
Yeah, just one final question, Lavi, from the audience predominantly. So you have soups, you have shake meals, and you have noodles. Is there any other variety that we can look for in the future?
Yeah, we do have a rich pipeline of additional categories. I can give you a hint. I don't want to break the news yet, but we have been participating in Singapore at the Livability Challenge, which was a Temasek and Ecobusiness organized event or challenge. And if you have a look there, you will see what we have presented, and that gives you the hint to what probably is coming next.
Okay, thanks, Christoph.
There might be a few people. Question mark.
There are a few people who want to be in touch with you on LinkedIn. I'll introduce you to them separately.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Thanks.
So thank you, Christoph. I think this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. You've been a wonderful guest who've sort of opened up, hopefully, a lot of people's minds. And it certainly has sort of given me a lot of food for thought and reinforced some of the choices that I've made. I've also gone on a similar lose weight. I mean, I still a lot to go, trust me, but I've lost about 25 kilos myself since going plant-based. But
congratulations. So
yeah, I know. So we are all on the right path there. But this has been a great sort of conversation. And I know that your organization, the Nutrition Paradox, is available for governments as well as public institutions to sort of source data from and collaborate and work with you. So if somebody is listening from any of those kinds of places in a public sector entity that's interested in sort of helping the planet, or a government entity, Christoph is open to having conversations with you on how some of the wisdom he's collected over the years can be shared and actually actioned on. So I think you really sort of hit the nail on how we can resolve the nutritional paradox after having done a really good job of explaining it. So thank you again, Christoph. Karthika, any parting words from you?
No, I think there are so many people who are WhatsApping me and LinkedIning me and Facebooking me, wanting to be in touch with Christoph and, trying to identify what he's doing so that they too can benefit from it and their communities. So Christoph, you will get a barrage of emails from me.
Thank you very much. That sounds fantastic. It sounds awesome.
Thank you so much again, Christoph. It's been a wonderful hour in the morning today. So great. All the very best for what you're doing. All the success for WhatIF Foods and the mission that you've started to do to resolve the paradox. And of course, a great going on the organization as well, the nonprofit that you're doing. That's great news.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the hour. I hope we will be back in touch at some point in the future. And it was lovely to speak to you. Super cool to actually have met you, be it over Zoom, so be it for the time being. I hope we can meet one day in person and have a chit chat going on.
That is our wish as well. Our wish as well.
Everybody the best.
Thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
and you
Christoph.
too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.